This episode of Wheat Pete's Word is brought to you by Syngenta. Stack the deck in your favor in 2025 with a stacked cereals lineup of crop protection products from Syngenta. With proven technology for exceptional disease control and greater plant resilience, you'll find game-changing solutions for your wheat crop. Visit syngenta.ca for more info.
Good day and welcome to Wheat Pete's Word here on Real Agriculture for Wednesday, March the 12th. On this episode of The Word, some really cool stuff to start off with. Then, what the heck's going on in other areas of the agricultural world? And after that, agronomy answers. Lots of great questions coming in, lots of topics to cover there. Let's go! Yes, so cool stuff. Let's begin with Costa Rica. I won't spend long there because I'm back and it was a great break. And man, if you've never taken a break, it really can rejuvenate you and get you ready to tackle the world again. That's where Wheat Pete's at. But a couple of notes about Costa Rica. First off, it is beautiful. It's a beautiful country. If you ever get a chance to do an eco tour there, it's amazing. You should do that. But what I will say is, oh my gosh, where we were, it was hot. And the first 3 days felt great because we'd come from the cold. By day 5, it was just getting to be brutal, and you just wanted to escape, and you could not. It was just there all the time. Why do I talk about this? Because we talk about climate change lots, and it's really a benefit for the mid-latitudes in the northern and southern hemispheres because things are getting warmer. It is not a benefit when you get to 9 degrees of latitude, which is the latitude of Costa Rica where we were. We're 9 degrees north of the equator, as opposed to London, Ontario, that is 43 degrees north. It's a huge difference, and that heat really is oppressive, let me tell you that. Next, oh my goodness, be proud. If you're not proud to be a Canadian right now, what is the matter with you? But every time I go to a different country, you'd kind of say, well, Costa Rica, they're not a first world country, they're a developing country. Man, those people are proud to be Costa Ricans, and we should be proud. Just be proud, because wherever you come from, people are proud of where they come from, and that is appropriate and good on them. Really friendly people as well. Last on this is, for goodness sakes, make an effort. I don't know squat Spanish, but they are Spanish, and I would greet them in Spanish, and man, they would respond, and I could just maybe do 1 or 2 interactions with them, and then they would start speaking like I knew Spanish, and I'd have to go, whoa, 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 whoa. But it just changed the conversation. You made the effort. They appreciated that you recognized English was not their first language, that it wasn't their country's language, and they treated you with a great deal more respect. So even when you go to Quebec, for goodness sakes, try to speak French if you can. It just is always appreciated from that standpoint. Okay, I'm going to move on. The book I have not yet finished, but this book by Timothy Caulfield, The Certainty Illusion. The one thing I want to tell you about that I've learned from that book that I did not realize, the placebo effect is massive. And so here's the example. Blind taste test. Take an apple. 2 slices from the same apple. Blind taste test. Let the person taste both slices. They're the same. Of course they're the same. Now, take the blindfold off and label one as a natural apple. I mean, gosh, what does natural even mean, for goodness sakes? But it's natural. Label the other one as conventional. And do the same blind taste test, and guess what? The natural one tastes better, even though they came from the same apple. Oh, the natural one tastes better, and it's the placebo effect. And time after time after time, if you think it's better, It is better, and it's real. Even though it's not better, it's a real thing that happens, and I had no idea that placebo effect was that impactful, but it absolutely is. Okay, here's the last one that I think is so cool. Epigenetics. So this is an area that we've been aware of for a long, long time, haven't done much with it, but it's so cool. So what is epigenetics? Well, it's really the modification of gene expression. And so the example in humans is that if you eat properly and exercise, then your DNA will express different genes in different amounts, different enzymes, different reactions than as if you eat poorly and don't exercise. So it's sort of the impact of the environment on how your DNA expresses. What's really cool, there's a company out there called Decibel Bio. It's not the only one, but last year, 2024, in California, 2 tomato fields side by side. They looked the same, but they sprayed the one field with a compound to change how the DNA of that particular field responded to the environment that it was in. They were using epigenetics to get that DNA to change how it expressed. The tomatoes that came out of that field lasted on the shelf 2 weeks longer. They tasted the same, they looked the same, everything was the same, except they lasted for 2 weeks longer because the cell composition in those tomatoes had changed based on the gene expression of the tomato plant itself. The lettuce that they did this with, it didn't brown. You know how you open lettuce up in your fridge and dang it, it's not long before it's all brown wherever you broke a leaf? That lettuce didn't brown for 3 weeks longer than the lettuce that they did not spray to change how the plant's own DNA responded to the environment. So this is massive in terms of where it can go when you're growing a corn crop and you see that there's no rain in the forecast. There's a pretty good chance that we can actually apply something to get that corn crop to change how its DNA expresses, the epigenetics of how that corn crop responds so that it will tolerate that drought better. And that means we can do it as we need to, as opposed to trying to change the whole thing, getting a drought-tolerant variety that maybe yields less when there isn't drought. Well, now we can take the high-yielding variety and get it to respond better when there is drought. So this is an incredibly exciting field. I just love it. We're not quite there yet, so don't say, oh, it's here. But it's close, way closer than I realized, and that is neat. All right, I'm going to move on and just give you a couple of quick updates. So for my great friend Eric Watson in New Zealand, he's a bit disappointed. They had really gloomy, cloudy weather through grain fill with their wheat crop, so his best wheat on his heaviest soil yielded only 15 tons per hectare, which is 223 bushels per acre for those of us that think that way. And Eric did say, wow, it really was about a ton per hectare better than he expected. The wheat came through better with that cloudy weather than he expected, but still nowhere near the record yield of 268.8, I believe, bushels per acre that Tim Lamyman has in the UK. Talking to Phil Needham out of Kentucky, they have had 18 inches of rain since January the 1st. Oh my gosh, that is just a whack of rainfall since January the 1st. And it's been super wet in Kentucky to the point that the winter canola crop they think is decimated. Now, with winter canola, you're always not quite sure, but their wheat is greened up and is growing, and they've put their nitrogen on. So, yep, it's looking a little tough. He said on one day, late February or 1st of March time frame, they had 7 inches of rain in one day. Any conventionally tilled ground, the erosion was horrendous. He sent a picture where a grower with 400 acres of wheat, the only wheat that wasn't underwater was one small rise right along the road. So, yeah, a little bit different in Kentucky than it is up here in Ontario, at least southwestern Ontario. By the way, on that note, man, the way the snow has melted, we've had a ton of snow this winter. In fact, some people saying up to 14 feet over the entire winter. But the temperatures have come in mild. We haven't had a ton of rainfall to this point. So yes, there is some ponding on the wheat, but not nearly as much as if we had got a lot of rainfall on top of this snow that melted the snow. It's been a pretty decent spring to this point. Touch wood. Hope it stays that way, and hope the maple sap keeps running. Interestingly enough, on that note, some days you'd think the maple sap would really run like a just crazy. It's sunny, it's +4, but cold north wind, and it doesn't run at all. So that whole industry is just a whole lot of fun. All right, I want to move on and talk about agronomy answers. So first up, my good friend Ryan Benjamin's out of Lambton County, sending a note that he's seeing a lot of snow mold in winter barley and also in the winter triticale. So Pete's out the next day and stops at some winter triticale, and oh my gosh, I have not seen that much snow mold in a long time. I don't know if winter triticale is more susceptible than winter wheat, but I would say as the snow goes, get out there and look. Particularly with winter triticale, we're growing it as a forage crop mostly in a dairy situation. You've got manure in the history. Lots of times growers will put some fall nitrogen on, and man, you get lots of growth in the fall. That predisposes it to snow mold. There looks to be a lot of snow mold in that winter triticale, some in the winter barley. But Bob, you asked me earlier, you wanted to sell some wheat, and I hope you did, because the price has gone down absolutely since you asked me that question. But I couldn't say that we wouldn't see snow mold in the winter wheat. I will say that there's a lot less in the winter wheat. It looks less susceptible than the winter barley or the winter triticale. But get out there and look. Antti from Finland connecting with me. He's working on his education, doing his degree, now going to do his master's, and he's looking at winter wheat. He's looking at a bunch of the stuff that Pete talks about and the things that we do here. One of his comments, as he sent back some of his research findings to me, was that in Finland, snow mold is so bad that they actually try to plant the wheat late to only get about 2 leaves, or at the most 3 leaves on that plant, because otherwise they get such a long extended snow cover. If they get good growth that would give them much higher yields, they get wiped out by snow mold. So cool that he's looking at that. He's going to look at some things, maybe some fungicides, some different approaches to see if he can control that snow mold. But snow mold can be a big issue. And as you look at the snow mold, by the way, cut the plant, look at the growing point. Just because you're seeing snow mold on the leaf tissue doesn't mean the plant is dead. Sometimes it can recover quite well, but sometimes it also is very devastating from that standpoint. You got to get that figured out, particularly if you're thinking about replanting at all. Eric asking me about breaking dormancy in winter wheat. And so lots of discussion in the Yen group about this as well. Typically, 250 growing degree days is the number that we look at, or 5 days where we get positive growing degree day accumulations. The challenge with 250 growing degree days, as Dennis Pennington from Michigan State points out, is that that's what we use from the 1st of January. Man, when you've got a ton of snow covering the wheat, I'm quite sure, in fact, that air temperatures don't matter if I have 2 feet of snow over top of that wheat crop, or if it's frozen soil. The real way to know for sure is just dig some plants up, look for white root growth. If you're seeing any new white roots, you know that plant has broken dormancy. All right, going to move on. And John from PEI reaching out and saying, to start off with, says, hey, Pete, listen to the word, listen to you on Agronomy Monday for a lot of years, and we have increased our yields based on the stuff that you talk about. Oh, John, thank you so much. Man, how could it be better than that? Pete wants to move the bar forward in agriculture. Sounds like some of the research, some of the ideas I learned from other people and talk about are moving the bar forward. John got 60 bushel per acre soybeans on the island this year. That's just awesome. His question is, all right, you talk lots about frost seeding, and that's great, but man, on the island here, we get just really wet springs, and we have this red soil, and we essentially go through quite a period where all we have is red mud. Will frost seeding work? And my answer is try it, John. Absolutely. So our experience would be that once in a while, we will get enough wet, cold weather after we frost seed that the seed will actually rot in the ground. Particularly on heavy clay soils, we've seen that maybe twice in the 30 plus years that we've done frost seeding, but that's still, I don't know, we're 90 plus success rate, and you gain so much by having that crop grow and develop under cooler temperatures. Just give it a try and let me know how it works out. I really think that it'll tolerate that red mud, but I will say, make sure that you use well-treated seed. And that's one of those things where I look at the yen data from Prince Edward Island, or from the Maritimes, I should say, the Maritimes yen. That's astounding data, because they actually sort their data based on certified seed versus uncertified seed, and they see a significant yield bump where growers use certified seed. The genetics should be the same. The vigor's a little bit different, perhaps, but man, if you don't well treat seed in a tough spring environment, that can have a pretty big difference. And so, John, make sure that if you're going to try it, you use good seed, good vigor, and well treated from a seed treatment standpoint. I'm going to move on and talk to Jeremy, Simcoe County. And Jeremy sent me some great pictures saying, okay, Pete, I don't understand. Every time our rotation is, and you'll hate this, Pete, because it's corn, and we grow spring wheat following corn. I know you're not supposed to grow wheat after corn because you get fusarium, but it's been working for us, and we're conventional tillage. But every spring, we plant the spring wheat, goes into good conditions, and about a month after, it just goes yellow. And he sent me a bunch of pictures. And then he also said, so, we broadcast about 40 pounds of nitrogen, and then we come back about 6 weeks later, or somewhere in that second node stage, with another 50 pounds of nitrogen. And you just look at those pictures and you say, wow, wherever the corn residue is heavy, the spring wheat went yellow. So my first question was, what about sulfur? No, John's putting on 16 pounds of sulfur in the early broadcast. That's lots of sulfur. And then you start thinking, but okay, heavy corn residue. Heavy corn residue is going to tie up the nitrogen. In fact, when we grow corn on corn, we automatically say you need an additional 30 pounds of nitrogen because of the corn residue tie-up. And remember that corn has a much later demand for nitrogen so that residue can start cycling. Spring wheat, really early demand for nitrogen. No, you absolutely, Jeremy, need to increase your upfront nitrogen application. I think go to at least 60 pounds. I even wonder if the total of 90 pounds is enough on that spring wheat, but of course, lodging, you got to watch out for that. But this is a mobilization of nitrogen by the residue that we often don't talk about. John Hurd talks about it lots in Manitoba. If you have residue on the surface and you put your nitrogen on the surface, then you basically give the bugs that are eating that residue up first shot at the nitrogen. It doesn't get down into the ground where the roots of the plants can get it. Immobilization can have a bigger impact than we realize, and I think that's what's happening in this particular situation. Phil from Northeast Indiana reaching out saying, okay, Pete, last fall, we put on 120 pounds of AMS. You're talking about sulfur. We go out this spring. Do I put my thiosulfate in my first application of nitrogen or my second application of nitrogen? We're going this weekend to beat the rain. The wheat here is greening up. And so, Phil, first off, you put 120 pounds of ammonium sulfate on the wheat crop last fall. I really would have held that for this spring. I'm not sure because this is Indiana, northeast Indiana though. Does that sulfur, is the sulfate sulfur still in the root zone of that wheat crop, or has it gotten leached out at the end of the day? Put the thiosulfate on early because we know wheat needs that sulfur early. The other cool thing that Phil passed on is that in his lifetime, wheat yields have doubled. In 1959, he was just starting out. He did a plot trial with a bunch of different wheat varieties. He had one wheat variety in 1959 that broke 60 bushels per acre. Last year, his wheat broke 120 bushels per acre, so he knows it can happen. But in his lifetime, the wheat yields have doubled. Tom asking about PGRs. So we've talked lots about PGRs, and Tom's question is, okay, Pete, I don't have lodging issues. I'm growing W38 on most of my acres. Our program with nitrogen, we have manure, but we're getting good yields. We just don't see lodging. You talked about PGRs in one of the sessions at the Ag Conference. Do we gain yield if we put that PGR on? How does that work? And the answer is that there's really no yield gain. The data shows no yield gain most of the time. If you do get a yield gain with the PGR, it's really quite small. In Europe, they use PGRs, growth regulators, to get the crop to be more uniform. And sometimes it can help with combine efficiency. But at the end of the day, from a yield standpoint, no. If you're not having lodging issues, and Tom, I know you also try to double crop, growth regulators will delay harvest by 1 to 3 days if you're trying to double crop and you're not having lodging issues because you're managing lodging the other way, then I don't think a plant growth regulator is for you. And with that, there's other things that I still have on my list, but I'm going to stop there because I am yet again out of time. That's it. That's all on behalf of the team here at Real Agriculture. This is Wheat Pete with the word for Wednesday, the 12th of March. Hey, keep the questions coming. Keep going out and getting that sap to make maple syrup. And we will talk to you next week. See you then.